All right, gave a minute for everyone to be getting in. Hello and welcome to the ASPPH Presents webinar, Career Spotlight, Commissioned Corps of the U.S. Public Health Service. Throughout the webinar, you are welcome to ask questions at any time. Please do so in writing. You can click on the Q&A box down towards the bottom of the screen and type your question in the pop-up box. Sometimes we'll be able to answer some in the chat. Otherwise, we'll also have lots of time after our presenters present for live Q&A as well. My name is Brenda Nickel, and I'm the Director of Career Services at the University of Nebraska Medical Center's College of Public Health, and it is my pleasure to serve as your moderator today. I would love to introduce the two presenters. We are pleased to have two lieutenant commanders with the U.S. Public Health Service joining us today. We have Gwendolyn Hudson, who is with the Department of Homeland Security's U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Health Service Corps. There at Department of Homeland Security, she serves as the Quality Assurance Performance Improvement Officer with the Medical Quality Management Unit. We also have Danny Malashok with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's Office of Radiation and Indoor Air. There, he serves as an environmental health scientist in the Indoor Environments Division. They're going to tell us all about how they got into this thing called the Commissioned Corps and answer all of your questions, and I cannot wait. So, Danny, off to you.
Hey, thank you so much. I'm going to try to get my slides shared here. So please do let me know if that's coming through to you. All right, I think we're good to go. I will actually pass it to my co-host here to see if she wants to kick us off. Lieutenant Commander Hudson.
Sounds great. Thanks, Danny. Good afternoon. And thank you, Brenda, for that welcome. And thank you, everyone, for taking time to attend today's webinar to learn more about the United States Public Health Service Commissioned Corps. My name is Gwendolyn Hudson, and I am a scientist officer at the rank of Lieutenant Commander in the Commissioned Corps. I have served for nearly 10 years in uniform with the U.S. Public Health Service. And currently I am detailed to the Department of Homeland Security ICE Health Service Corps as a Quality Assurance Performance Improvement Officer for Medical Quality Management. I am fortunate to have been a recipient of not just one, but two fellowships with the Associations of Schools and Programs of Public Health back when it was known as ASPPH with 1P. Those two programs, a pre-doctoral fellowship with the CDC Prevention and Research for Minorities and a postgraduate fellowship with the EPA Environmental Health Fellowship Program, provided me the support that I needed really to lead me here today speaking with you. So I'm shamelessly putting in a plug for many ASPPH internships and fellowships, because without which I would not be talking to you today. I am also a proud alumnus of Xavier University of Louisiana, which recently began a public health program for undergraduates, the University of South Florida College of Public Health, go Bulls, and the University of Alabama Birmingham School of Public Health. So at this time, I will hand it over to my co-presenter, Lieutenant Commander Danny Malashok. Danny, please tell the audience a bit about yourself.
Thank you, Lieutenant Commander Hudson. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today, and a big thank you to ASPPH for the opportunity to speak with you all about the Public Health Service Commissioned Corps. I am proud to have served in the Public Health Service for 7 years, and I'm currently stationed with the Environmental Protection Agency in Washington, D.C., where I'm serving as an environmental health scientist in the Indoor Environments Division of the Office of Radiation and Indoor Air. And like Lieutenant Commander Hudson, I was also fortunate to participate in ASPPH's Environmental Health Fellowship with the Environmental Protection Agency. And that opportunity helped me, helped pave the way for my career in the Public Health Service, and allowed me to gain great experience working on environmental health issues in two offices where I had an opportunity to work on issues around climate change, chemical risk assessment, and children's health. Before the fellowship, I completed my master's in environmental health at the University at Albany, and I'm currently working on my doctorate part-time in environmental health at the George Washington University Milken School of Public Health, and I'm also a registered environmental health specialist. You'll get to hear a little bit more about our experiences and in particular how our public health training and experience shaped our pursuit of this career. But for the time being, I'll pass the mic back to Lieutenant Commander Hudson.
Thank you, Danny. Next slide, please. All right, so before we begin, we, the presenters, we have no conflicts of interest, and the content presented today will not include discussions of any product or commercial activity, nor do the thoughts and opinions of the presenters represent the official stance of our respective agencies or the U.S. Public Health Service. And before we move on to the next slide, we do not have a list of objectives for today's webinars. However, our hope for today is that each of you, whether this is your first time learning about the Commissioned Corps or you've interacted with Commissioned Corps officers before, we hope that you take away at least one new thing that you did not know before today. Next slide. All right, so who are we? What is the U.S. Public Health Service Commissioned Corps? You'll see on the screen that we were established in 1889, but in actuality, the service dates back much farther. We were created to protect, promote, and advance the health and safety of the nation approximately 200 years ago. And today's Commissioned Corps is a part of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and our top leaders are the Assistant Secretary for Health, the U.S. Surgeon General, and the Deputy Surgeon General. Next slide, please. So just to give you a little bit of history, a very abbreviated history, because over 200 years, there's not much we don't have much time today to talk about everything, but the Corps has a history that dates back over 2 centuries. And on July 16, 1798, the 5th Congress passed the Act for the Relief of Sick and Disabled Seamen. And that was signed by President John Adams, which provided for the care and medical treatment of merchant seamen and sailors. So this began the Marine Hospital Service. And officers who worked for that service, they worked along coastal waters from Maine to Louisiana and focused on the migration or the potential migration of diseases that could spread inland. The service then began to grow its public health expertise and professionalism beyond just medical doctors. And on January 4th, 1889, Congress officially created the Commissioned Corps. So that's usually when we celebrate our birthday. And that was in response to a shortage of healthcare providers in the Marine Hospital Service, which was later renamed the Public Health Service in 1912. So since its creation, the U.S. Public Health Service Commissioned Corps has become a public health leader by promoting and prevention initiatives, health education programs, environmental health techniques, various research initiatives, and treatment advances that have increased the life expectancy of the population by over 30 years. Next slide, please. So today, the Commissioned Corps is actually one of the 8 uniformed services. And our uniqueness is because we are the only one dedicated solely to protecting America's public health. And globally, we are the only known organized uniformed service focused on public health. We were inspired by the call to serve vulnerable and underserved communities through addressing public health issues, both within the nation and abroad. And as I mentioned before, we are led by the Assistant Secretary for Health, the ASH, with operations and activities overseen by the U.S. Surgeon General. Currently, we have approximately 6,000 public health professionals who are dedicated to addressing these public health concerns and providing clinical care. And in this photo here, being sworn in is our current Admiral Rachel Levine. She is the Assistant Secretary for Health, and she has also made history as being the first openly transgender 4-star officer in U.S. history. Also pictured is the current U.S. Surgeon General, Vice Admiral Vivek Murthy, who has also made history by having the distinction of serving 2 non-consecutive terms as Surgeon General. So he is both the 19th and 21st U.S. Surgeon General. Next slide, please. Okay, so at this time, we have a very brief video to show you that kind of sums up some of the reasons why me, Danny, and many other officers do what we do.
Working in the public health service fulfills a calling. Call it instinct, call it heart, call it gut. It just comes from inside. Whether you're pulled or drawn to the service because of love of people, love of medicine, love of caring for others, or love of nation, or maybe a combination of all three. The real question is it in you?
Fantastic. Thank you, Danny, for that technical support. But now we'll turn it over to you to provide more information about what we do and some of the benefits of the service.
Thank you, Gwen. I'm going to start us off with talking a bit about our mission and values, which is to protect, promote, and advance the health and safety of our nation. And as students, public health, and those actively working as public health professionals on today's webinar, I know that this mission is one that resonates with many of you. These are through these core values of leadership, service, integrity, and excellence, we exude our commitment and dedication to the public health and safety across the United States, as well as globally. And as officers and public health leaders, we hold these values above all else to ensure that we can deliver the best public health practice that is also of the highest standards of excellence. So what do we do? What is our day-to-day, and what is it that we do to advance the health and safety of the nation? We are a service of diverse and experienced, highly trained professionals with a variety of backgrounds and training. But what we have in common is that we each in some way advance essential public health services to ensure that people across the United States can live healthier and safer lives. And that those whom are most vulnerable or live in areas underserved have access to care and health services. We're also public health responders, and we deploy domestically and internationally to ensure for the health and safety of those affected by natural disasters, public health emergencies, and other crises. We're also leaders. You may find us heading programs and offices across federal agencies and departments. And we're also innovators and scientists, helping to shape creative and novel ways to address medical and public health challenges, including vaccine development, novel research, and so on. And there are many benefits to being a part of our service. There are a number of reasons why I consider a career in the public health service rewarding, and these are just some of those key benefits. This includes a big one, which is, for me at least, which is that officers in the Commissioned Corps have an ability to move to offices and programs of different agencies and departments across federal, state, local, and tribal governments. And we're encouraged to seek out challenging roles and to enrich our careers by diversifying the experiences and the skills we obtain. We also have many opportunities to seek out professional and technical training, as well as education and certification. And this includes earning education benefits through the Department of Veterans Affairs, along with housing benefits. And finally, we, in addition to those benefits, we also accrue 30 days of paid sick leave, or excuse me, paid leave, in addition to sick leave, which allows us to maintain balance between our personal lives and our work lives. And there are also several financial advantages to serving in the Commissioned Corps, including non-taxable housing and subsistence allowance, and other potential specialty pays depending on your profession, your role, or where you are serving, if it's For example, in a place that is underserved or hard to serve, there are benefits for the leadership and commitment to providing care to individuals who are in those underserved communities. And officers and their dependents also have access to comprehensive health benefits. And then similar to other types of jobs out there, we also have a 401k style retirement plan and life insurance and survivor benefits. And later on in today's webinar, we'll talk a little bit more about some of the other benefits, including some of those specifically that we take advantage of. But we will continue to talk about some of the benefits of our service. So where do we work? We, as Commissioned Corps, currently have a presence in more than 800 locations, including all 50 states and numerous foreign assignments, such as the World Health Organization and the World Bank. And we're located across many operating divisions of the Department of Health and Human Services, including the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, Center for Medicaid Services, Food and Drug Administration, Indian Health Service, NIH, and so on. We're also located at non-HHS agencies, including the Environmental Protection Agency, where I work, the USDA, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, Department of Interior, and Veterans Affairs, as well as embedded within our sister services. So we're pretty spread across the federal government and outside the government, with lots of opportunities to engage in public health issues. And as I mentioned earlier, we also have a number of officers who are detailed to state and local and tribal agencies. So now I'll pass the mic back momentarily to Lieutenant Commander Hudson to talk about our next slide.
Thank you, Danny. As we've mentioned before, the Commissioned Corps is composed of approximately 6,000 elite uniformed service officers. And these officers are highly qualified public health professionals and serve in the most underserved and vulnerable populations, both domestically and abroad. Public health service officers, they shape their careers through these diverse opportunities for professional growth. I know we all go through school and focus on several disciplines for education, but what we found is that as officers, you typically become jack of all trades. Not only are you a subject matter expert of your discipline, but you are leaned upon to show those skill sets that you've learned, those leadership skills that you may have, and fill in the gap where it's needed. Some of the service opportunities for officers are flexible, and they do allow for new missions and career mobility across several duty stations, as Danny mentioned earlier. And many officers are placed in one of, or all officers are placed in one of the 11 categories shown on the screen right here. We won't go into each and every one of these today, but Danny and I will tell you more about our respective categories and some of our experiences that we've had so far. Next slide, Danny. Okay, well, I will start it off. As I mentioned before, I am a scientist officer, and right now there are over 400 scientist officers in the Commissioned Corps. And the qualifications for being in this category include a terminal or a doctorate level degree, such as a PhD, a DRPH, science doctorate, to name a few, from an accredited university or program. Applicants for certain professions must also possess a required license. And for this category, that typically applies to clinical psychologists, licensed clinical social workers, or the like. There are a number of specialty areas that scientist officers focus on, and they are listed here on the screen. And you may notice many of them are public health disciplines, such as epidemiology, biostatistics, environmental health, health policy, and many others. And for scientist officers, our agency assignments are typically in a number of the agencies Danny already mentioned, CDC having about 45% of the current scientist officers, but also the Federal Bureau of Prisons, the Department of Homeland Security, where I am currently stationed, the Department of Defense, the VA, the FDA, and the National Institutes of Health. Next slide, please. So now I'll tell you a little bit more about my personal career as a Commissioned Corps officer. As mentioned earlier, I am a Quality Assurance Performance Improvement Officer, or what is similar to a program manager in other federal agencies. As a scientist officer, my discipline is environmental health. I am actually a registered sanitarian. I've done food safety in my past. I'm a true practicing environmental health professional. However, I have served in many roles, and currently my role as a Quality Assurance Performance Improvement Officer does not apply to environmental health. And I'll explain a little bit of why that is and why that I feel that is so beneficial to my career development. So some of the agencies that I have been placed are listed here. My first position was at the FDA, Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition, in the Office of Compliance. I was environmental health specialist that basically wrote field assignments for investigators, assignments for environmental sampling for Listeria and Salmonella. So a lot of things that were very relevant to my educational training, my previous employment in environmental health. I also worked as an Administration for Children and Families, Office of Human Services, Emergency Preparedness and Response, Planning and Training Team Lead. My PhD work was in emergency preparedness. I looked at the thoughts and the feelings and the preparedness level of emergency response coordinators in the Southeast. So that was very applicable to my PhD studies. And again, now I am with ICE Health Service Corps in healthcare compliance. In this role, I basically utilize my skill sets, skills that I learned not only in school, but also through the ASPPH fellowship programs in coordinating work groups, in quality research methods, survey analysis, focus groups, one-on-one interviews to help identify some of the needs that the organization may have. I also heavily use my data analysis skills that were learned in school. It doesn't matter what the focus is, whether it's environmental health or anything else. Our training in biostats is very applicable everywhere. So I'm able to use data-based recommendations for decision makers. And this has been extremely rewarding because the populations that we serve are the most vulnerable. And the place for Commissioned Corps officers to step in and help identify some of those needs, it is extremely needed. And for someone who is trained in public health, you know that our profession as a whole, it basically leans on a lot of the skills in other sciences, in math, in technology, and we are those jack of all trades. So it is very useful, the training that you're getting in your educational programs in this particular field. Some of the other opportunities that I've had were details, leadership positions, such as a branch chief at CIFSAN. I was able to stretch my wings a little bit and figure out if I have the chops to be a supervisor. So that was extremely useful and very early in my career. I was also a special assistant to an office director within the FDA at the Office of Regulatory Affairs. And most recently, I participated in a fellowship at DoD with the Defense Advanced Research Protections Agency. And that opportunity was extremely unique to my career. And I do know for a fact that if I had not been in uniform, I would never have access to such an enlightening and such a rewarding fellowship. Some of the other collateral leadership and continuing educational training that I've had are listed here on the screen. I won't go into each and every one of them, but I will point out that all of those have utilized my skill sets with organizational management, leadership, presentation, public speaking, and those are things that I learned and kind of honed in my fellowships with ASPPH. I will say that the Commissioned Corps, regardless of your professional and personal needs and aspirations, there are opportunities for you to develop those. A lot of career advancement. I received my REHS while at the FDA, and they help support that. Currently, I am seeking a certified professional in healthcare quality in support of my current role, and also had the opportunity to participate in a formal new leadership training program. And before I hand it over to Danny to talk more about the environmental health, I do want to stress how ASPPH, that experience contributed to this. At EPA, I was a fellow there, new into the federal government, and I was exposed to serving on those work groups, witnessing those FTEs and how that organization works, developing reports, preparing briefs alongside my mentor, and just exposure to various other officers and offices and potential positions. And compared to some of my other fellow officers who went through officer basic training with me, I had an advantage, an understanding of how the federal government works from this different agency, which is transferable across many agencies. Even the mandatory trainings that we took, I know Danny remember those that were provided through ASPPH during our fellowship, gave that additional training to help develop public speaking skills, presentation development, and a safe setting so that once you're out there representing your federal agency, you feel confident in performing those tasks. So Danny, with that, I will go ahead and hand it over to you to talk about environmental health.
Thank you, Gwen. Gwen is such a rock star, and she's one of the first people I met when I was a fellow at EPA. I had just moved to the Washington, D.C. area, and she was a fellow at EPA, and I was connected with her through my fellow colleagues, and she continued to be a rock star throughout her career, and also was an inspiring voice when I decided to join the Commissioned Corps. So I just wanted to, as I was listening to that amazing journey of yours, I wanted to share that connection to myself. So I'll talk a little bit about the category that I'm a part of, which is the environmental health category. And we have over 300 environmental health officers across dozens of assignments, including Food and Drug Administration, Indian Health Service, EPA, CDC, and so on. And our officers come from backgrounds of environmental health, occupational health, industrial hygiene, and health physics. And, And many of us come along similar journeys to become qualified to join the public health service. There are several routes that you can pursue to join, to apply and become considered. I'll just highlight here on the slide the third option here, which is the route that I took. I came from a school program of public health that was certified by the Council on Education for Public Health. And I'll just point out here that there's been a recent update to this qualification that requires individuals to become certified with a registered environmental health specialist certification, which I currently possess. And there is a good amount of literature on our website for how to learn more about that particular certification, but you may fall into these other categories for qualification. And of course, we have other categories that you may fit more appropriately into, as Gwen pointed out. So please do, if you have questions for how to get more information about that, please do follow up in the chat. And we'll be also following up with more direct information on how to learn more. So now I'll talk a little bit about my career, my past, and I did talk a little bit about this in the intro, but I want to point out here, which I did not talk about earlier, which is the kind of diversity of positions that I've been able to work within as a public health service officer. I've now worked in 3 different offices, including a variety of different types of projects, collaborations, interagency work groups, and things of that nature that have allowed me to work and extend myself beyond those agency roles. But 2 of the positions I have been with have been at EPA, including my current position and previously working with the Office of Children's Health Protection. And the first position of my career in public health service was at the Department of Homeland Security. I have served as an environmental health scientist at EPA, and at the Department of Homeland Security, I was an environmental health and safety and medical planner, which had me developing plans for the federal government for how to respond to things like pandemics, natural disasters, and other public health emergencies. as you can see here, I can't get enough of school. I've had quite a bit of schooling, and I'm currently working on my part-time PhD program using some of the benefits that are afforded to me through the Commissioned Corps. So we'll talk a little bit about what those are later on, but I wanted to emphasize that opportunity to go back to school while I'm working full-time has been one of the benefits of the service. I've also had a lot of opportunities to engage both regularly within and outside of the Commissioned Corps to enrich my leadership experience, have had an ability to influence public health activities on things like children's environmental health, which I care a lot about, which I posted here. And as I'll talk about on the next couple of slides, these photos are on the right here, excuse me, on the left, are from some of the deployments that I've been able to engage in over the past few years, assisting with the COVID-19 response. And I'll talk a little bit more about how that's influenced some of the career choices I've made as well. But before I move on, I do want to talk a little bit, as Lieutenant Commander Hudson described, how my ASPPH fellowship was really tremendous and influential in shaping kind of where I am today. I was very lucky to serve in 2 years of the fellowship program at the Environmental Protection Agency, and I got to work side by side with leaders in the environmental health and protection fields, people who are truly shaping policy nationally and globally. And this opportunity helped me to shape the way that I think about and approach public health problems, but it also allowed me to pursue opportunities that I would not have been able to access had I not had those experiences and made those connections. Secondly, one of the things that was really influential about this opportunity was that I gained a whole new understanding of environmental health, science, and policy, particularly in things like risk assessment, risk communication, each of which are things that I use regularly and have given me somewhat of an edge in job opportunities I pursued later and was able to take on. And then lastly, one of the things that I truly, on a more personal note, really appreciate about that experience is that I got to make lifelong friends and connections at EPA and across the federal government, including Gwen. Many people who I consider my closest friends, and there's something to be said about getting to work with people who share similar values for protecting public health and the environment, but who are also totally authentically big nerds and can appreciate and are okay with that. So I consider myself one of those people. So I'll now move us ahead to talk a little bit about what I started to introduce earlier, which is deployments, and one of our key functions, which is to deploy in times of crisis and in need, both domestically and internationally, to support things like natural disasters, humanitarian relief, to support international training and coordination, and so on. During my time as an officer, the Commissioned Corps has been involved in countless missions, ranging from fighting Ebola, providing disaster relief following hurricanes, to providing medical and public health services and leadership throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. And one of the recognitions of the pandemic for the field of public health largely was, but especially for our service, was that we need more exceptional public health practitioners in our service who can support national and global needs in times of crises like the pandemic. So we'll get into this a little bit later on, but I wanted to share with you that in order to meet this need, Congress enacted the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act in March 2020, which provided funding for response training for our service and has helped pave the way for a reserve duty component for our Corps. And the Ready Reserve, which you'll hear about later on from Lieutenant Commander Hudson, is made of public health and medical professionals who are not serving on active duty, but maybe working within their communities, but that can be called up in time of need to assist with responses and to fill critical needs. And they also have access to training and other financial and educational benefits, which we'll talk about later. So as I mentioned earlier, throughout the pandemic, we have been at the forefront. We have been working in leadership roles, including in hospitals and nursing homes, carrying out vaccination campaigns, setting the standards and the guidance and communications around public health and safety actions, and doing all sorts of essential other medical and public health roles. And these numbers are a bit dated, but pretty accurate to where we are with our current deployments, but we've had more than 4,500 officers who have deployed throughout the pandemic, which has amounted to more than 200,000 days in the field providing care and assistance. For me personally, over the course of the pandemic, I deployed 5 times. This is not a typical tempo for deployments. Before the pandemic, I deployed once in support of hurricane response, but with this being an exceptional time, an exceptional need, I was fortunate that I was able to deploy on behalf of the Commissioned Corps to varying field technical and leadership roles. At the onset of the pandemic, I deployed with a strike team to help establish and operate a temporary hospital, which was designed to help the hospital system in the state where we had deployed to decompress their very overfull hospital beds. And I later deployed on an array of different missions, including to oversee safe administration of COVID-19 vaccines to vulnerable and at-risk communities, and to do infection prevention and control assessment and intervention in assisted living facilities. And throughout that time, had other opportunities to support medical and public health infrastructure, like hospitals that were impacted by both the pandemic and by things like hurricanes and wildfire smoke. I most recently served as the Chief Safety Officer for our Commissioned Corps Headquarters Command Cell, and had an opportunity to oversee the safety and welfare of over 300 officers across a wide-ranging number of missions working on COVID-19 response, other humanitarian assistance, and hurricane response. So I'll now stop talking about myself, and we'll pass the microphone back to you, Glenn, to talk about your experiences as well, which we're very excited to hear about.
Thanks, Danny. I think in the interest of time, and because you've had a great deal of COVID response, I'll just mention just a few. I did respond as well for COVID, primarily to the Secretary's Operations Center. And I also responded a great deal for some of the hurricanes. At FDA, we do look at not only the manufacturing on a day-to-day basis, but also assisting in identifying those manufacturers that need to get up and running as soon as possible when a hurricane or natural disaster or any other incident happens, so that we can effectively provide those resources that are needed to get the community back up and running. But I think because we do want to respond to some of your questions, and there are a number, and we're going to get to those, we'll move on to the next slide so that we can go through our presentation and get to those Q&As.
Join us on the front lines of public health by submitting your United States Public Health Service application at USPHS.gov/apply-now. A board of PHS officers will review your application. They will decide whether to call you for an interview. Once you interview and get a medical exam, and your exam and application are accepted, you then get a chance to consider what jobs in our 20+ federal agencies are a fit for you. As you apply to jobs, you will also go through a security clearance. Once you're cleared and get offered a job with an agency, that's your call to duty. That's where you'll begin serving on the front lines of public health in the United States Public Health Service. Join us on the front lines.
All right, so hopefully with some of the experiences that Danny and I have relayed today, as well as looking at that very brief video on how to apply, we've kind of piqued your interest and you want to know a little bit more about the benefits, right? So in addition to that career development, having those diverse opportunities, meeting diverse people and those who are also passionate about public health, there are benefits to this particular role that are different from other federal positions or any other position that supports public health. The columns on the screen, career growth, financial incentives, some of the work-life balance, Danny did touch on earlier, but we just want to hone in on a few of those. We talked about our professional development, our leadership training, the ability to mentor other officers as well as students. But we also have access to the post 9/11 GI Bill. So some of you may be prior military, you may be aware of this, this educational resource that allows tuition assistance as well as a stipend for those who would like to go back to school for a certificate program, a degree, and have it be financially supported either 100% or almost to 100%. Depending on what type of program it is, you do have access to that. And a lot of you, because you might have your degree and you're done with education, it doesn't mean that you don't get to use that. That particular benefit is also transferable to spouse and direct dependents. Some of the other financial incentives, in addition to those mentioned by Danny earlier, are a housing allowance that is non-taxable. The subsistence is also non-taxable. One of the hidden benefits for the financial incentives that a lot of people don't really think about is the non-tax portion of our pay. That is a trickle-down effect. It affects if you have a student loan and you're on an income contingent or income-based repayment, and it is based on your taxable amount, that will significantly reduce the amount of student loan payment. You also have access to what is called the service, the SCRA. I can't remember what the acronym is. Danny, you might know that right now, but it also reduces the interest rate for any type of credit, whether it's a bill or mortgage or anything like that, to 6% or less. Anything prior to your being assigned a position and becoming fully commissioned or on active duty status. Also, Danny mentioned the 401 style repayment plan. You probably, if you know about military, there was in the past what we now call a legacy system of doing 20 years of service and then being able to retire with 50% of your taxable or base pay. We now have a blended retirement system. That system is a combination of both the legacy system, what was a pension, as well as the 401 style retirement plan. That is a great benefit for folks who are uncertain of how long they would stay as a Commissioned Corps officer. If you choose to do 3 years, 6 years, 8 years, you will have something to take with you for your retirement because of that 401 style retirement plan. There are also access to life insurance and survivor benefits. And then Danny mentioned the work-life balance with the 30 days of paid leave. So that is earned at the start, day one of being active duty. You have 2.5 days a month that are earned. You also have unlimited or paid sick leave, as well as paid maternity leave, which is one of the best at 12 weeks. There is also adoption and paternity leave, and of course, paid federal holidays. So if this interests you, if this is something that you think would be beneficial to not only you, but your families, but also your career development, I would greatly recommend that you look into a career with the U.S. Public Health Service. Danny, is there anything else that I missed here that you'd like to touch on?
I don't think so. I think that was a great overview. And we'll be following up with more information after the fact that will kind of help provide fill some gaps, answer some of the finer questions, which we also, I see some really fantastic questions coming through the chat, which we'll get to.
Yes, yes. So the next slide, please. So in addition to those benefits that I just covered, we do have other student training opportunities. So maybe a career as a regular Commissioned Corps officer, which is what Danny and I are. We are full-time active duty regular Corps officers. Maybe you're at a point to think, well, I want to try something out first to see if that is something that is for me. Our student training programs, the Junior Co-Step, as well as the Senior Co-Step. The Junior Co-Step is the Junior Commissioned Officers Student Training and Extern Program. It is a mouthful. And the senior co-step is the senior commissioned officer, so student training and extern program. The differences between the two is the junior co-step is, think of it as an intern over your school break. So if you are in school right now and you have an internship requirement for your degree, it is an excellent opportunity for you to not only fill that requirement for your internship for your graduate degree, you also have the ability to see what it's like to be a career officer. You also have access to a federal agency that in the future you may be interested in having a federal career with, whether it be in uniform or not. Some of the requirements for applying for that program is at least 2 years of study towards a baccalaureate degree in environmental health, engineering, nursing, pharmacy, physician assistant, dental hygiene, dietetics. There are a number of professional and disciplines that you can use as, or that qualifies for this particular program. Master's students also can qualify for this, as well as doctoral students who have completed at least 1 year of study in a doctoral program. The benefits are the pay. You do receive pay and allowances of an instant level officer. That tax-free housing allowance is also a benefit, as well as the healthcare and travel costs. For the senior co-step, that is a little bit different than the junior co-step in that it almost guarantees you a job after you graduate. You can become an officer upon graduation. So this program focuses on students entering their final year of graduate school or professional training, and you will get pay and allowances while you're in that program, not necessarily working, but in exchange for that, you are committing to enroll as a Commissioned Corps officer upon graduation and serving a number of years based on the years of payment towards your tuition. So I believe it's a 2-for-1 deal. But the benefit of that is you do have a full-time job upon graduating, so you don't have to look for a profession, a career position anywhere. It is guaranteed. Next slide. So I know we have some questions, and I wanted to kind of present this first before we get to those questions. The Ready Reserve Corps, this is new. Danny mentioned the CARES Act that was signed into law on March 27, 2020. As a part of that act, the U.S. Public Health Service received authority and funding for the establishment of the Ready Reserve Corps. It is a little bit different than the regular Corps. You can think of it as the Reserve Corps for the Army and some of the other military units. And they typically call those weekend warriors, right? So it's a similar concept where there are professionals, public health professionals in your day-to-day job. If you do want to serve the public, if you want to serve in uniform, but only part-time, this is the perfect opportunity for you to look into this program. You will have access to the support and the training that the U.S. Public Health Service provides for deployments, for response. The Ready Reserve will serve a significant role in not only being potentially deployed, but also backfilling for regular Corps officers who are deployed so that we can maintain that level of professionalism, public health bodies that are in various states and federal agencies. Right now, the Commissioned Corps has opened up the Ready Reserve. I believe they began receiving or commissioning officers in 2021. I had the privilege of meeting a few of those, a PA from New York, a public health faculty member, and also an engineer. And they are truly excited, and they love the opportunity to serve on weekends or in any type of capacity that they can support the regular Corps. The PHS is currently accepting Ready Reserve Corps applications online, as well as regular Corps applications and junior co-step and senior co-step. So if you are looking for more information about that, we will direct you to the USPHS.gov website, but we can also answer questions for you today. So with that, Danny, I will go ahead and turn it over to you to close us out so we can get to these questions.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining us today. We are very grateful to have your attention and to share with you the benefits, the exciting opportunity that is serving in the public health service. And I'll close out with this photo of Glenn and I during a volunteer opportunity we had to judge a science fair in Washington, D.C. So grateful that we could team up to share our perspectives with you today. And I will now kind of transition us over to answer some of your questions. So Brenda, thank you so much for helping us with that.
Thank you both so much. I was trying to answer some, but I also obviously don't want to give any incorrect information. So there were several questions in the chat or in the Q&A about citizenship. And so do you have to be a U.S. citizen to become a part of the Commissioned Corps?
Great question. U.S. citizenship is a qualification of the service. And I believe that is that, and along with other qualifications, I believe if you navigate to our main website, which I see Brenda has already shared, some of those key kind of upfront things to be aware of, like the U.S. citizenship, age requirements, and things of that nature are all kind of front and center.
And that
Glenn,
does include natural. Yeah, I was just going to say that does include naturalized citizenship. So those who were not necessarily born here but became a citizen through testing and all of those different requirements and are now a naturalized citizen, they are eligible to become an active duty officer.
Thank you. There were also a lot of questions about degree requirements. Where's the best place? Because there are lots of individual circumstances being shared, and I appreciate all of them. Yes. Where's the best place to go to clarify whether someone qualifies based on the degree? And also, if you can address also, are there opportunities at the master's level? So both of those questions.
Yes. So the best place is USPHS.gov. For every single discipline, we showed you the 11. There is a chief professional officer as well as the chair of what we call professional advisory committees. And those are the leads of every single one of the various disciplines. And for each of the 11, there are separate requirements for those professions, and it's based on that professional level of qualifications. So it can vary from a bachelorette for nursing to a PhD for a scientist. So it is probably your best resource to go to USPHS.gov and to those various disciplines to see the exact list of qualifications, and that is listed on their website. Regarding masters, you will see that as well. For a number of the disciplines, primarily health service officers, that is one of our largest category because it does contain a large group of masters of public health and other master's disciplines. But we do accept officers or applicants who have a master's level background. Danny, do you want to add to that?
Sure. I think I don't have much more to add to that. I will just point out that the environmental health officer category is probably one of the few where you can enter into service with just a bachelor degree. The few first options that I didn't quite go over, they point out the accreditation bodies for programs, both bachelor and master's programs. So there are some entry points to the environmental health officer category through that route, but for my eligibility, I came in using my master's credential. So I had graduated from a school of public health with my master's. That's what enabled me to become qualified.
Thank you. There are also a cluster of questions around those with military service, either prior military service or maybe currently serving in a reserve capacity. Can you talk about how that impacts the process of applying? Please.
Sure. And I was going to speak on that on one of the slides, but I did want to just get to the questions. We do have a number of intra-service transfers. It is extremely common to have officers move over from the Army, from the Navy, and become a Commissioned Corps officers. We also have a number of enlisted who utilize their post 9/11 GI Bill or obtain their educational requirement for a particular discipline and are now Commissioned Corps officers. So those folks who were service members in those other services, they do carry over a number of their years of service. There is a limit, and you can find that information on USPHS.gov, but we do absolutely take inter-service transfers, as well as those who may be current civil service, federal employees who are interested in transferring over and wearing the uniform. And those years of service are also considered when basically trying to figure out what their years towards retirement would be, especially if that civil servant officer is already in the Department of Health and Human Services. Danny, do you want to add anything to that?
That hit it on the nail.
If you, if any of the above applies to someone, does that impact what do they still have to do basic training, or there were a couple of questions about that?
Absolutely. Because every service is different, right? It may benefit you. You may become that rock star at OBC if you have prior service training, and you can help out those who may not have even seen a uniform before. But it is absolutely a requirement for every commissioned officer to go through officer basic course. And it actually is quite fun.
Yeah, so you gotta learn the lingo.
Learn the lingo, you know, learn the ropes, and it is a great opportunity to understand the service traditions, the uniform requirements, understand deployment structures and our capabilities as a service, and to meet your fellow officers.
Right.
So you build rapport, and that's how you make your first friends in the service.
There were several questions around the application process. And so I will drop, there's like the 8 steps to becoming an applicant. I'll drop that in the chat. But if you can maybe talk a little bit about in general, like the timing, how long people should expect this to take. And if both for JR Co-Step, Senior Co-Step, and General Commissioned Corps. So are we talking, is this 2 months? Is this a year? And anything else that you would share as advice for the application process?
Sure. So things have changed a little bit since Danny and I both came in. My own personal experience was it took me 2 years. That is not the case anymore. I can definitely tell you that. But generally speaking, it takes you have about a year, I'll put it that way. Some go a little bit faster, some go a little bit slower, but from the time that you do the screening for the questionnaire, complete the application process, I believe they give you about 9 to 10 months. You saw in that video, there is a dual application process, which is a little bit unique to PHS as compared to the other services, in that not only do you apply for commissioning to the PHS, you also have to locate or find a qualifying federal position. So I think I saw a question asking about whether or not you have control over where you go. You do. You do get to look for jobs on USA Jobs. I do actually recommend people reach out again to those chief professional officers for your various disciplines, and try to get access to their career development work groups. And they usually send out listservs of job announcements, which are a little bit easier to navigate than USA Jobs. If you've ever experienced USA Jobs, it's a little difficult, but I will say that it on average, it probably takes anywhere from 9 to 10 months. I've seen that somewhere, but there is a fact sheet on USPHS.gov, and we can provide a link to that can answer some of your questions about the application process.
Thank you. We're at the top of the hour, but I want to see, there was I think a really great kind of wrap-up question I would love to hear your thoughts on, kind of related to everything we've been through over the last couple of years, and just how do you see that impacting the Corps, yourselves, in positive and negative ways, and give us some hope going forward, please.
Danny, you want to start off on that?
Yeah, sure. So I think I saw that question, and being contemplative, being reflective of all we've been through. I'd say there's definitely a bright future for public health. I think we, as the Commissioned Corps, have had a long journey, as Gwen described earlier, playing a pivotal role in responding to public health crises and influencing public health policy, research, and practice over quite some time now. And we've really grown, adapted, and pivoted as needed in order to meet those changing needs. And I think that's true today. We're in the process of adapting lessons learned from the pandemic and growing our core to be more nimble and better able to meet emerging challenges. And one of the exciting ways that we're doing that, which we've talked about a couple of times now, is by expanding our Ready Reserve component. And for me personally, I think the opportunities that we've had to be at the forefront, to be a part of the nation's public health response throughout the pandemic, has been really reaffirming to me about why I joined the Corps. I came from a public health background, but had a strong desire to be in service, to be there when our communities most needed help, and to be on the front lines. So I felt this, experience was, of course, a very challenging time, but I was very glad to be able to support in some way. And I think we as a service will continue to do that. And I think we will continue to play a significant role in the future. So for all public health interested individuals, we would welcome your interest in the Corps, and we hope you'll engage with us to learn a little bit more. And Gwen, feel free to add to that bit of a rambled response.
No, Danny, I don't know if I can do it any better. I think that was fantastic. I will add this. In any type of response or incident, there are always lessons learned. So, and I don't know if I'm freezing or not, but my connection seems to be a little slow. But I will say that some of the lessons learned from this pandemic are already being applied within the Corps. We have the Ready Reserve, right? Danny talked about that and how that is such a great benefit, and will be able to increase our capacity to have a quicker response in the future, and also be able to support each other, not just our communities and those recently affected, but being in public health, we see the impact of the recent pandemic on mental health. And that is also a huge platform for the Surgeon General right now. We as Commissioned Corps officers have benefited from the fact that the Commissioned Corps has recognized this early, and they developed what's called a Corps Care Program. And that program is provided for commissioned officers and their families, those who do respond and are out there, and the families who are missing their officers. You heard Danny, the number of times he responded. There is a gap left at home as well. So it will impact you physically, mentally, and emotionally. And they determine that this is definitely something worth putting our resources into. So that's really all I have to add to that, Danny. I just think that there are always lessons learned from these types of events. And the important thing is to fill in the gap so that next time we can basically do things better and better each time. So hopefully some of you public health professionals will join us as a regular Corps officer, Ready Reserve, junior co-step, or senior co-step, whichever fits your fancy in the future.
Thank you both so much for everything you do in your careers, and also taking time to be with us today. And for everyone who joined us, as someone who helps students navigate all of this, I know it can be tricky to find all of the details and answers and information that you want. And so if we didn't get to your specific question, I apologize. When the link is posted on the page of the recording, we will include some links that were mentioned during the talk, and any additional ones that we think are helpful to answering some of those questions that were posed in the Q&A today. Because I know it's, believe it or not, the webpage is a million times better than it had been in the past. Like, there's a lot more information readily available, but I know not every question is quick to find the answer to on the website, but we'll do our best to get those links to you. And thank you so much, Gwen and Danny, for answering at least 50 questions live. You were rock stars at that. So join me in a virtual round of applause. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.